Dzień dobry Państwu. Widzę, że jeszcze część z Państwa do nas dołącza, więc chwilę poczekamy. Tymczasem dzisiaj widzimy się na webinarze pod tytułem Scopus AI, sesja Q&A z ekspertem. Razem ze mną jest Adrian, który Państwu opowie na temat tego, co w Scopus AI się dzieje. Jeżeli chodzi o to, jak będzie dzisiaj to wyglądać, to od razu powiem, że na podstawie pytań, które pojawiły się już na pierwszym webinarze, mamy taką przygotowaną listę, powiedzmy, na którą będziemy odpowiadać. Natomiast będę także Państwa w trakcie zachęcać do tego, żeby zadawać pytania do nas na żywo, bo mam nadzieję, że takie pytania też się pojawiły i niekoniecznie tylko będziemy dzisiaj przerabiać pytania z poprzedniego webinaru. Dobrze, widzę, że już wydaje mi się, że większość z Państwa jest z nami, więc na początek kilka słów na temat tego, co będzie się działo, jak będziemy funkcjonować. Tak jak zawsze jesteśmy z Państwem na platformie Zoom. Jeżeli chodzi o zadawanie pytań, to bardzo Państwa proszę o zadawanie ich w sekcji pytania i odpowiedzi. To z tego powodu, że mi jest tam łatwiej zarządzać, a Państwa też jest z nami dosyć sporo, więc myślę, że to pozwoli nam na łatwe zarządzanie całą dyskusją. Jeżeli chodzi o jakiekolwiek dodatkowe kwestie, no to tutaj zachęcam do używania czatu. Mam nadzieję, że część z Państwa się z nami przywita. Ja bardzo serdecznie Państwa ze swojej strony witam w to piątkowe popołudnie. Jeżeli chodzi o link do nagrania, bo tak jak Państwo już pewnie zobaczyli w powiadomieniach, nasze spotkanie dzisiaj jest nagrywane. Zostanie on przekazany zarówno drogą mailową, jak i również będzie dostępne nagranie na naszym kanale YouTube, więc mogą tam Państwo zajrzeć. Myślę, że powinniśmy się spodziewać, że na kanale YouTube pojawi się ono we wtorek. No i to myślę, że z mojej strony tyle. W związku z tym przejdziemy do sesji Q&A i w tym momencie ja również zmienię język, w którym będę do Państwa mówić, bo tak jak zapowiadaliśmy, nasze spotkanie będzie odbywać się w języku angielskim. So Adrian, it's very nice to have you today with us. I just made a short introduction. I'm not sure how good is your Polish, but well, you can try. Let me just let's first, maybe I will stop the sharing of my screen, so you will have this opportunity to share yours, and also I will switch on, yes, exactly, the subtitles. So here we are. And yes, now I will give the floor to you, so you can start from the questions that we received on the webinar. That was the intro. And once we have any questions from the audience, I will let you know.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kat. And unfortunately, my Polish is not very good at all. But it is an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you all today. And I'm very excited about spending the next hour or just under an hour now going through some of the questions you've already submitted, and also taking this opportunity to answer some of the other questions you've raised around Scopus AI. So for this presentation, what I've done is I've actually created a little deck of the main questions I've received so far. And I'd like to just share my screen so you can see that as well. And hopefully you'll see my screen now. And Kat, can I confirm that with you?
Yes, the screen is visible.
Fantastic. Now, I'm not going to be demoing things and showing you things, which it sounds like many people on this call already are familiar with. But as a quick recap, the Scopus AI product itself was designed specifically to help address a major researcher need we saw, which is when we spoke to researchers on Scopus and we looked at them doing searches, we found that 60% of those researchers had challenges around discovery type research, i.e. learning about new things or trying to explore ideas in a different area that maybe they could use to apply for their own. And we saw this as a very big problem. It's quite challenging to do, especially if you don't quite know the right words to use to search for the right kind of topics. And something very wonderful happened is two great technologies came along, large language models like ChatGPT, and also small language models. And from these, we were able to build a new natural language search that enabled us to build something that helped address and answer questions in natural language, like anyone can put in and get back relevant information. Oh, we already have hands raised. I'm not sure, Kat, how do we want to handle that during the presentation? Maybe wait till the Q&A session. I guess if you have Q&As, I think there's an area where people can submit their questions. Is that right?
Yes, there is a Q&A section that you can use. I will read the question, but so far I see that I will read you the question if they are in Polish, but so far I see that they are in English, so you should be able also to read.
Okay.
I
enough.
hope that your Zoom is in English, not in Polish like mine.
So we'll get to those questions in a second, but I want to just set this context that the main problem we were trying to solve on Scopus AI was really trying to make it much easier to learn about new topic areas, a problem that's really big for early career researchers, and also really big for researchers looking to explore new ideas in a field they may not know very well. And we built a range of different features, which I think most people on this course had an opportunity to play with right now, including our summary, which is based on the trusted Scopus corpus, an expanded summary, which takes in a broader perspective of views, the concept map, which is a visualization of the main ideas, foundation papers, which can show us the main papers that have heavily influenced an area, topic experts, and go deeper questions, an easy way to navigate a space. And of course, it's all backed by the Scopus corpus, which goes through an external peer review process by a content advisory board. And with that short introduction, I'd like to start going into the first questions that we've received, and I'm happy, of course, to answer other questions that you have here as well. So one of the first things that I saw on the list was, could you please explain what kind of technologies are used in Scopus AI, and why did you decide those ones in Scopus AI? So we did play around with a lot of technologies, and I'll be honest, we were playing around with even ChatGPT 2 when it was first still very early on, and some other technologies around how to create better search. I've been working in search for almost 10 years at Elsevier. So the technologies we picked are a small language model, which we called Mini-LM. It is an open source model, which anyone can access, and you can see the training data for. And we experimented with many small language models specifically to help us build this new natural language search, which we call a vector search. And this is why we're able to handle natural language questions. So we benchmarked a range of different models, and we found that in our testing that this Mini-LM model performed the best in terms of retrieving the most relevant documents in Scopus based on the abstract content. And that was really important because the other technology we used, which in this case was ChatGPT 3.5 specifically, which is hosted by our partner Microsoft, it is important for us to try and provide, of course, the most relevant content to ChatGPT with a lot of really fantastic prompt engineering to ensure that responses that are generated are high quality and trustworthy. So these are the two primary technologies we've leveraged in Scopus AI. Small language model for building the vector search, and the large language model, which is where we're able to sort of take in your question, what we think are the relevant documents, and use that to help generate a response, of course, referencing the sources that any claim or statement was made from. We have also introduced another technology recently, which we just announced. We've introduced another small language model called a cross-encoder. This is a new generation of search technology that allows us to effectively re-rank results. So before, what was happening is we were taking the top 10 of a large corpus. Now what we're doing is we're taking the top 100 and re-ranking it using this thing called a cross-encoder, which also is open source and anyone can go look at. It's called another Mini-LM cross-encoder. And we take the top 10 from that, and we use that to help generate a summary. And we've seen a fantastic increase in the user satisfaction of the summaries generated since we launched that a couple of weeks ago. Second question I've seen is, and some of these questions have multiple questions in there, so I apologize. How was the AI model developed? Scopus is a bibliographic database with a limited record set, no full text. Did you fit any LM model to your data, or did you create a completely new model limited only to Scopus data? Which LM model does Scopus AI use? So, as mentioned before, we're using ChatGPT 3.5 at the moment. And what we've done is we haven't trained any model. In fact, we found that when we tried to do any kind of training, it didn't perform the way we wanted to. And also, we were a bit concerned that if we did do training, it would always be locked in to the time period when the training occurred. I.e., if we trained on everything in the last 10 years, then we wouldn't see this month's articles, next month's, so forth. We'd have to keep retraining. So we've actually developed a technology called, well, we haven't, but we've leveraged technology called RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is a combination, as I mentioned, of using search to retrieve most relevant documents and pass that to the large language model. The large language model we're treating more like a sort of reasoning and writing engine specifically. So it's not tuned on any, it's a very generalist model. And we're trusting the right content we're passing from our search to help guide that model in producing the right kinds of outputs, along with some really, really good prompt engineering, which we've spent hundreds of hours on trying across a range of different disciplines to ensure that responses coming back are high quality. And also, more importantly, if we don't have a direct answer to a person's question or query, we've also built in something we call reflective prompting, where the response will sometimes say either, yes, we can give you a direct response, or sometimes they'll say, well, we can't give you a direct response, but we can infer information, or sometimes they'll just say, we can't give you a response at all. So that's the approach we've taken. It's a clear separation of the two. So Scopus AI, why find so little references? I tried a few questions, but it always gives less than 10 references, and many are dated references. So how do you decide which references to show in the summary? So I can pull this question apart a little bit. Scopus AI uses documents from the last 10 years. And I can appreciate that for some fields like computer science and others, you might consider anything older than 3 or 4 years can be a bit old. Other disciplines, maybe not so the case. I think it's worth talking a little about the approach we take to select papers. So what we're doing, which is a bit different actually from how almost every other search engine works on compared to Scopus AI, is we are prioritizing documents based on the content within the abstract specifically. Now, a lot of other search engines, they bring in other signals like citation count, where something was published, who published it, and a whole range of other factors. And we really didn't want to do that in this case. One of the great things about being in Scopus is that all the content has gone through a fantastic external peer review process. So we believe it actually has a really high quality bar, which means that we believe that we don't need to rely on these other signals like how many citations something has received, for example. And we can rely purely on how good the content in the abstract is related to the question or the query that someone has made. So we've taken that approach, which is quite different, but we believe it leads to much better generated summaries. Now, what this sometimes can mean is that we are pulling out stuff people don't expect. Sometimes we might be pulling out some documents that might have lower citation counts than people expect, or sometimes something a little bit older. Depending on your perspective, can either be a feature or it can be a bug. Some people highly value the fact that now we have removed the bias around citations. And now we are surfacing a lot of different content that has great information, but may have been overlooked for a variety of reasons in the past. That said, we are also looking into ways that you can have more control over what kind of year ranges you want to use for Scopus AI. So that's coming in the next couple of months, and we're exploring a good way to do that right now. So if you are concerned about outdated references, they may be outdated, but hopefully they're highly relevant. But if you're still unhappy with that, we're hoping it will give you control for that in the future. The other part of this question is the number of references. It's only up to 10. And we recognize that this can be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes what people want to do when they go beyond 10 references is more akin to a systematic review. And we're kind of trusting that the top 10 is a good representation of information to help answer a question. Now, you may have noticed that we actually have another feature on Scopus AI called the expanded summary. And that actually uses up to 20 references. And we keep consistently being told that that's more useful for a lot of use cases that the current summary isn't that good for. So we are going to be looking to expanding beyond the 10 to a larger range of references to be used in the summary. It's a really big challenge to overcome because with these large language models, the more stuff you pass into it, the more risky it gets in terms of it having a risk of hallucination or missing information. So we've tried to strike a good balance there, but we've also think the technology is now at a place that we're happy that we can start expanding that beyond the current 10. So you can look forward to that hopefully in the next couple of months as well. So the next question I have here is, how can I influence the creation of a map of answers when I want to narrow the search to a particular aspect? And so this is relating to the concept map, which is the visualization feature we built for Scopus AI. And now this concept map is not built on the abstract content. It's built on the keywords associated with the different papers we've identified. And the goal of this was to use those keywords to influence and draw this almost kind of bird's eye view of the main ideas related to this space and how they might be connected together. So the best way to influence this is to be more specific in your query. The more broad you are and less specific, the more chances, the more risk there can be that either it produces a very broad overview, or sometimes it might even get completely the wrong perspective. It might look at if you say something like mathematics, for example, or mathematical theory, it might look at that from a perspective you didn't expect. So the best way to influence it right now is to be more specific in the initial query you put into Scopus AI. That said, we also are experimenting with ways that we've heard a lot of good things about a concept map, and we want to help users give them more ways to be able to control that. So one of the new things you'll see in concept map is the ability to, first of all, click on different nodes in concept map. We've just launched this feature, so you can get a bit more detail about what that is. But in the future, we'd like to explore also maybe the ability to, say more specifically how you would like a concept map regenerated. So we've had way more positive feedback on the concept map than we expected. And we know it's not a perfect feature. So we're actually working to try and give you more controls over it directly. But for now, the best way to influence it is to be more specific in the initial query.
Adrian, I'm going to add here the question because there's another question about actually mapping the Q&A.
Ah.
So the question is, are you aware that generated charts not always reflect the structure of the summary provided by the Scopus AI?
Yeah.
And there are some key points without caption.
Oh, I can address the first part of that. Yes, sometimes it may not reflect the summary. It's trying to solve a different problem. It's trying to give more a broader perspective based on the author keywords supplied. So we recognize that, yes, there might be a slight mismatch between the two. That's entirely possible. That might be something we can address as we add more documents to the initial summary and give it more context. But that's always going to be a challenge because the concept map is trying to solve the problem of seeing a broader perspective, which sometimes a summary won't do because you might ask a really specific question about a summary and it might try your best to answer that specific question in the summary, but the concept map might contain keywords from those documents that are a little bit broader, and it might be tried. So that is a risk potentially. The second point is key points without caption. I'm trying to work out what the caption is. I'm assuming that means referencing, potentially.
Well, we can ask, I mean, I'm going to ask actually
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
we
Yeah.
could get some additional comments about what is the meaning of the caption and what is the point with the key points. And before we receive the answer, please just go to the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically saying the node is not described. That should not happen ever with the node is not described. So that is a bug that I haven't seen actually. So if please feel free to contact me about that or pass on information to us about that because I'd like to see what kind of query causes that. Yeah, absolutely. You can share a screenshot, no problems.
Yes, please, you can send, my email is definitely already sent to you. So please, if you can send me, I will make sure it goes to Adrian and we will take a look at this because as Adrian mentioned, this is definitely not the plan for us and we would like to check what's happening. Thank you very much also for the feedback.
I appreciate it. Thank you. How are foundation papers selected and ranked? Are they higher ranked as true source papers, providing the foundations of a field, or review papers? That's a good question. So we do have a description of how foundation papers work on our website, but at a very high level, here's how it works. So we've trusted Scopus AI to help write you a summary. So we've got a list of references we've used to help generate that summary. And what we've done is we're trusting that those initial references are very relevant to the question that you put in. The foundation papers, what it's trying to do, it wants to find out, okay, for those papers we've chosen, and actually a few more as well, because we actually take a much broader list than maybe sometimes the exact number of references used to write the summary. We're asking the question of those papers using another piece of technology built in Scopus called the citation graph to work out, okay, do these papers reference the same paper? For example, 5 of those papers might reference a single paper that was, and we would say, okay, that is a strong signal that this commonly referenced paper or document is really influential, has really influenced the ideas based on this question that's been asked. So that's what the foundation papers are doing. Now, this is really important because one of the biggest piece of feedback we get in Scopus AI is, yeah, you wrote me a fantastic summary about something like large language models, but you didn't mention like this paper or this paper. This paper is really important. An example of that, if you're into computer science, would be things like Attention is All You Need, which was the seminal paper that influenced a lot of the large language models we have today. But it won't necessarily come up in the papers we choose to write a summary. And that's because some of these foundational papers, their abstract content, or even the content in the full text, doesn't maybe describe exactly the type of information you were looking for. It might have been that that information was then later taken to another paper and some research was done. But in itself, without that query would have never really picked up that paper directly. This is why foundation papers is important, because we still believe that we should showcase the main papers that have influenced the papers used to help write the summary. And that's what it's doing. And it's not limited to review papers. It goes across all the document types we use for Scopus AI. And right now, the ranking works like this. So the more times a single paper is referenced by the documents we use to write the summary, the higher it is. And then it goes for a secondary ranking where, okay, let's say there are 3 papers in foundation papers that all receive 3 common citations. Then we would re-rank those by the number of total citations they received. Hopefully that answers your question. There's more information on our website if you want to see how that works. But in short, we're using the papers used to write the summary, and we're trying to see if those papers reference the same paper or not. Okay. The search of references allows only from 2013. It is impossible to expand the scope, including all the. Is it impossible to expand the scope, including all the sources? Why did you decide to include references from the last 10 years? If the results are based on abstracts, and okay, so this might be 2 questions, so I might need to split this up. I know it's part of it. So if the results are based on abstracts and not the full text of articles and books, i.e. 2 risks I see. The abstracts in 2013 may not have been written in terms of the most important findings, but rather the incentive to read the whole. And number 2, how to prevent users, PhD students, undergrads from making superficial use of publications. Okay, so there's a few things to unpack in this question. It's a good question. Let me address the first one. Why the last 10 years? Well, originally with Scopus AI, it was designed to sort of help researchers kind of get a snapshot or overview of a given subject area. And we wanted to try and primarily base that on more recent content. In fact, the first version of Scopus AI used just 5 years. But as time has gone on, we've heard more and more people saying it's important for us to include a wider number of years to influence how these summaries are written. And we think that the main reason for that is kind of like what we discussed in the foundation papers. People want to see more of these influential papers in the summary. So, but however, we also recognize that there are really relevant papers that do talk directly to a subject area that could be 20, 30, 40 years old. Humanities is a fantastic example of that, evergreen content. So the plan is we want to expand beyond 10 years. The long-term plan is we want to go to the entire Scopus corpus. And what you're going to see practically there in the next month or 2 is we're going to go to 20 years. And we haven't announced this yet, but we were moving to 20 years. And our challenge right now is to make sure we still find this good balance of making sure that newer papers still get a little bit of boost. But we're doing that in consideration that there might be some really relevant papers that might be 20, 15 years old. So we will go beyond 10 years. We recognize the value of having a larger corpus. And actually, the foundation papers feature doesn't have a time frame restriction. It goes over the entire Scopus corpus already. So you don't have to worry about us not missing a seminal paper from 1997 or 1980, for example. The other part of this question is the abstracts may not have been written. Yeah, so I think that addresses that. And yes, to your point, important findings. Hopefully that wider time window will help, but we're also hoping the foundation papers helps with that a little bit. And the other part of this question, I think, is how to prevent users, PhD students, undergraduates from making superficial use of publications. So this is a bit of a different question, unless I'm misunderstanding it. But the way I'm interpreting this is, how do you stop? I'm not sure this is a question of like, well, what's to stop anyone just looking at the summary general of Scopus AI and saying, that's good enough. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to run with it. Scopus AI is not a writing tool. It is a discovery tool. We recognize that's really hard sometimes to explore new areas when you don't understand them very well, and even harder and sometimes you just want to experiment with combining ideas together. This is not designed to take away from the reading experience of academia. That there's no replacement for that, even with a full text solution. Scopus AI should be really considered as another kind of search tool, and we should talk to institutions and to users, researchers, students, that use this as a search tool to help you get started with an area, to experiment, to explore. Go and read the full text if you find something useful, because exactly like you do with a search tool today, you wouldn't just copy the abstracts from a search results page and say that's good. And this is the same we see. So we are providing some guidance in how we think Scopus AI should be used in this way. But of course, we understand that from an institution to institution, guidelines on how to use AI-generated tools can vary. So we can help there, provide some guidance if you're considering Scopus AI, but obviously we don't see this as a replacement, nor do we think this is meant to encourage superficial use. This is meant to make it easier to get you to more interesting and relevant information faster. I hope that answers your question.
I hope so too. I have one more question that is coming back to the foundational papers.
Yes.
So let me interrupt a little bit. So it's more like asking for the examples. It's not even a question. It's asking for the examples. So what is the difference between foundational papers, review with highest citations, references, re-ranking secondary citations? And can AI see if the author was co-author of a big book? And how do you measure foundations effects or effects for the specialization? Sorry, it's in the chat. You can try to read it in the chat, because I can imagine listening only to me is not that easy.
Okay, let me just pull this out here. So there's a few questions in there, Peter. So give examples, differences between foundation papers, review with higher citations, references, re-ranking, secondary citations. Can AI see if the author was co-author of a big book? It's actually much simpler than that. So foundation, maybe I can do this with an example of some kind.
Yeah, I think it might be easier with the example.
Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen.
Okay, so far we still see the slide.
Yes, give me a second. Right. Apologies, everyone. So to be really, I see it now. Okay, found it. This is the problem of having too many slides, too many windows. So just to go over it, I put in large language models here just now very quickly. What's happened is we're not using citations, we're not using authors, we're not using where something was published as an influence on what papers we pick for this. We're using just the content within the abstract itself to pick relevant documents to help write this summary. Now, and so just to put out the cable, we're purely basing this on the relevancy of the abstract. After that, we're looking at all these like 7 references here and a couple more, and we're trying to see how many of these papers, what have these papers referenced? And this is how the foundation papers documents is done. So here, for example, Attention All You Need, which is a really important paper in this space, has been commonly cited by 4 of these documents. And we have another one here, which is commonly cited by 3. Now, in the case that, let's say this was also commonly cited by 4, what would happen is we would then rank these, in this list at least, by the number of citations. But primary ranking here is happening based on the commonly cited. On that, it's not more complicated than that from us. We've kept it really no impact from citation count for the summary, no impact on authors. We can't see who's authored something from a book or something like that. We give the documents equal weighting regardless of the document type. This is primarily ranked based on commonly cited by these documents here. I hope that answers your question, Peter. If it doesn't, I'm happy to come back to this later. And apologies if I misinterpreted it.
Okay, so I think we are coming back to the slides, and Peter just confirmed that it is this.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Thank you, Peter. By the way, if I speak too quickly, please let me know, because I'm known to speak too fast. Are the generated graphics covered by copyright? No, they are not. Nor would I ever want to live in a world where they are. The generated graphics are a tool. They're just a tool to be used. And I mean, we don't recommend you go and put them in your publication. Some people have done that, which continues to surprise me. But you're free to use those as you wish. They are generated based on, author keywords from the documents. They are meant to provide a bird's eye view. If you find them useful, please use them. But you don't really need to cite us or anything like that unless you want to. But we don't recommend the use in publications or anything like that. So, but you're free to use those as you want. From which part of article Scopus AI collects information? Title, abstract, keyword, or full text of the article? So I've mentioned this a few times, but to be really clear, number one, we do not use the full text. For our use case, which is trying to get an overview of many different things, we're not trying to be a strict question answer system. We're meant to be an exploratory tool. And abstracts are the world's greatest summary of what's important within a given paper. So we're using abstracts primarily for Scopus AI. In fact, we're using exclusively for the summary generation search. We're not using title for the summary, and we're not using the keywords in the summary. But as we've already heard, we're using author keywords for the concept map. So there's 2 things: abstracts for the summary, author keywords for the concept map. Now, full text, if people keep telling us that full text they see a lot of value in, we can look into that into a bit more detail. I certainly can see where there's some scenarios where getting a very specific part of a document can be valuable, but it's something we're experimenting with, but it's not something we have on the roadmap at the moment. Right now, it's just abstracts and author keywords. Titles we've excluded. People always ask us why we haven't included titles. And this is not a criticism, because the world of academia is very competitive, but titles we found can sometimes not be misleading, but they can sometimes oversell the content within the document. And that's not a problem. And we understand that's the world we live in, but also titles don't tend to really have the valuable information that we think would actually help write a good summary. Abstracts do, because they actually talk about what the information in the document is. So that's why we've taken this approach. Do I understand correctly that this all works based on what is in the abstract? Yes, as mentioned, it works in the abstract. What about publications without abstracts? Books, chapters, editorials, lists, etc. Yeah, it's a good point. So there is content without abstracts in Scopus. And actually, surprisingly, there's more abstracts there than you think. In fact, I think it's a very small percentage of the content doesn't have an abstract. Either it tends to be quite old. Actually, even books and chapters have abstracts. It's quite surprising. So first of all, what we can see is that there's not much content, especially in the last 10 years, that doesn't have an abstract. As we, of course, increase the time range, that might become a bit more of a problem. That said, this is also where foundation papers comes in, because foundation papers doesn't care about your abstract. It just cares if you've been commonly cited a lot by the papers we use to write the summary. So even if you are missing an abstract, we're hoping that that gets covered using the foundation papers feature. So I hope that answers the question. We think the risk is very low, especially for the 10, even 20 years. And secondly, if you don't have an abstract, but you're really influential, you're going to get found by the foundation papers. And yes, you're correct. It is the abstract. How does Scopus AI differ from, just going to add a space there. This is my OCD speaking. How does Scopus AI differ from ChatGPT? How is Scopus AI better, or how does it differ from existing solutions, Elicit or Paper Digest? Okay, so we're getting a bit real here with the questions. So how is it different from ChatGPT? Massively. So don't get me wrong, ChatGPT, Elicit, Paper Digest, many other tools, they're fantastic tools on the market. And we're really excited that they exist, and they do a lot of fantastic things. And we know a lot of people already go to like different websites. They'll try and copy and paste information. The tools like ChatGPT, they'll try to help write them summaries and do all those kind of things. And we totally are happy with, if you're happy with that, we're happy with that. There's no issues there. Same with Elicit. Elicit can be a fantastic tool to do more like literature. So I think systematic reviews, and it can be really good to, if you want a very sort of detailed, broken down look at a field, it can be very good for some use cases there. We are building a tool that's quite different from these. We're trying to build something that enables better discovery, which is a problem that frequently comes up for a lot of people. And we're trying to make the world of academia more accessible, more digestible to more people. And we want to do it in a really fast and easy and convenient way. So one thing about Scopus AI compared to ChatGPT, for example, is you're plugged in directly into the world's most trusted corpus of information. Our data, and well, the information within Scopus has gone through a set of peer review and an external advisory review. So we have high confidence. It's really, really trustworthy. And that's the reason also why we built the search tools in the way we did, primarily basing on abstract content. That's not really easily replicable by anyone that we're aware of right now. Number two, we make it much easier than going and copying and pasting things. You might as well just do things directly in Scopus AI. Secondly, we've also introduced a lot of, we've done a lot of work in trying to make sure we do this in a responsible and ethical way. So Scopus AI goes through a lot of checks around making sure we're not introducing unfair biases. We also do regular checks with things like Ref Checker and other tools to make sure that our risk of hallucination is very low. We also introduce tooling based on community feedback that's designed specifically for the researcher community. So for example, one of the primary things people tell us they're concerned about hallucination, or are we saying, oh, how confident we are in our responses? You're not going to get these from these other tools. And because of that, we built things like our reflection layer in Scopus AI. You may notice, for example, as I mentioned before, sometimes when I ask a question, Scopus AI goes, yep, here's your response. Other times they'll go, here's a response, but we couldn't find a direct answer, but we've inferred the information, or we've just say outright, we cannot find information. If you want to do that kind of work on ChatGPT, it's actually quite a lot of work, and it won't have the benefit of the other technologies we built to help identify the most relevant papers to help us do the best job there. So what you've got here is a dedicated team trying to really solve this problem of making discovery and finding relevant documents easily 24 hours a day, effectively, and improving it all the time based on a large community of researchers. So it's tailor-made. And also for Elicit and Paper Digest, as I mentioned, great tools, but they're trying to do different things from us. We're trying to help, bridge gaps between disciplines and introduce to new areas more easily. And of course, we have the trusted Scopus corpus of data, which is a very unique and valuable asset, along with other things like our citation graph, which allows us to do things like the foundation papers. And of course, we're trying to bake it into the researcher workflow. So you're in Scopus anyways doing work. Scopus AI is just a click away. It's and you can also use that to jump to other parts of the Scopus product, like article pages and or maybe author profile pages. So we're hoping we make it as easy and valuable as possible, and also as trustworthy as possible. So that's where I say our main differentiators are.
I'm going to say I agree. I very much agree, and I really recommend everyone to try to ask ChatGPT for the source of information, because then the discussion is becoming very interesting, and at some point ChatGPT is really confused with what do you want to know from it and what are you actually looking for. So yeah, I agree that the value in having the content and the source and information from where how we are creating the summary, this is like for the research very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that trusted corpus means we can do things that other competitors or other people in the field can't. For example, the way we build our search, I think it'd be very hard for anyone to do something similar. I think they'd always have to rely on other metrics like citations or where something was published. Okay, next question. And this is a biggie, so I'm going to have to break this down as well a little. I think we're doing all right for time. So if there's people asking questions in the chat, we'll have time to get around to them. Or we'll just slip them in. As we know, most editors of prestigious journals require a signed declaration that author did not use artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT when writing article text. Absolutely. Is it formally and legally permissible to use or / be inspired by the results of a session with Scopus AI when constructing text submitted, example, to the publishing house Elsevier? In short, can I legally use this tool to demonstrate this use in declarations for submitting text to a journal and or in the notes of in article text? And how can the information generated by Scopus AI be used in scientific work in articles to avoid misunderstandings related to plagiarism and any other accusations? Okay, big question. I mean, they're all great questions. But this boils down to what I think is, hey, maybe Scopus AI made something that's pretty useful, and I like to be able to use that information in the work I'm doing. I think and am I going to get in trouble if I do that? I think that's what this question boils down to. If anyone who submitted questions on the call, feel free to correct me. The short answer to this, I can definitely tell you, it is definitely not going to be illegal to be inspired by the results. That's definitely not going to be a problem. You are free to be inspired anywhere you want. We're not going to be worried if you're inspired by anything Scopus AI. We aim to inspire you on purpose. Now, where this gets a bit more tricky is, what do you do with the stuff that's been generated from Scopus AI? Can you use it in your work directly? And the answer to this is, for me, first of all, take a look at your institutional guidelines. Every institution has different ways of looking into this and how they plan to use generative AI content in their work. Elsevier is pretty clear that I think at the moment, we do not accept AI-generated information within our publications. And I know there's still discussions going on about, well, some people declaring ChatGPT as a co-author, for example. And my current understanding of that is that that's not permissible under the current guidelines for submission. One thing I would say here is, please don't copy and paste anything of ChatGPT and use it in your published work. That's not the way it's meant to be used. Feel free to use it for your own notes, not a problem. Feel free to take the references we've used and go forth and read them and with your own interpretation and make your own deductions about how you want to use that in your work. It's kind of like saying you can go to scopus.com today, write in a search query, and then copy all the abstracts into your paper and try and submit that. It's a bit like that. We wouldn't recommend doing that. That would be plagiarism. And in this case, it's not plagiarism, but also Scopus AI is heavily inspired by those abstracts. It is trying, and in fact, in a lot of ways, if something is phrased very well in the abstract, we'll copy it verbatim. But we're not trying to claim that this is an absolute source of truth. This is meant to be a research tool to explore an area and get you on board very quickly. And more importantly, get you to the relevant papers that we think are going to help you in your research journey quickly and easily. That's our goal here. But if you want to copy in things for your own notes, if you want to be inspired by it, that's absolutely fine. we don't recommend using it in published works. And I don't think you need to declare you're inspired by Scopus AI. In the same way you wouldn't say you're inspired by Google Scholar or Scopus or Science Direct. I think that would be unfair to say. I'm hoping that helps.
If I can add a few things, because I did my homework in that part, honestly, as I was one thing curious, another I'm trying to convince myself I'm going to write one more research paper in my life, which is not an easy part. So I really recommend everyone to look through the guidelines also of the journals, because each journal, even if we talk about publishing house like Elsevier, has their own regulations. And some of them are giving a more freedom in terms of using artificial intelligence, some are more limiting. Definitely, I didn't find any journal that was making it possible to write the article with a ChatGPT. So this is forbidden, and I really don't recommend to go that way. ChatGPT also cannot be the co-author of the publication, that's for sure. For being inspired, I didn't find any guidelines that you cannot be inspired, so I can confirm that's not an issue. For saying whether this is a solution that you use during preparation or not, this is on the individual level of the journal. So again, coming back to the guidelines, make sure that you read them and you also understood whether the journal is asking only about writing article with the artificial intelligence, or is it really about what was used in the methodology? Because these are two different things, and I see that sometimes it's confused. So I really recommend to split it and make sure where the journal is pointing out that artificial intelligence cannot be used. And I think that's it.
That's a very comprehensive answer, Kat. Please be inspired wherever you can be, by the way. That's my general recommendation. I certainly am. What are your plans to expand the use of GenAI on Scopus? Okay, so there's a lot of things we're looking at right now. In the short term for Scopus AI, I can speak to that you're going to see a lot of improvements in the quality of the summaries being generated in the next couple of months. That's our primary focus right now, to get those as trustworthy as possible. You're also going to be seeing some more intelligent tools on Scopus AI to help with your query writing. We haven't formally announced anything, but maybe I can share a sneak peek of that today. You'll be some of the first in the world to see this, and we're planning to roll this out. In fact, even people in Elsevier haven't seen this.
Now I feel I'm in a very specific part of people in Elsevier.
So some of the more eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that we have something here called Copilot. This may not be the final name, but one thing we recognized is that sometimes when you put queries in that have spelling mistakes, or maybe sometimes you're putting in a lot of different terms, not necessarily in the question, or sometimes you might be using a different language entirely. Scopus AI doesn't perform at the level we would like it to. So Copilot is something we want to be trialing with a small group of users over the next couple of weeks, which we think is going to help a lot of these problems. And I thought we can maybe demonstrate this, like, I was going to try, let's try Polish would make sense. I mentioned my Polish isn't very good. But if I put something like, I don't know, climate change and battery technology, or maybe climate change and carbon cycle, for example. One thing we want to do is we make it, if you turn this Copilot on, we're experimenting with this idea that we can take a query like this and we can optimize it for Scopus AI. The problem is that right now is a lot of the abstracts are written in English, which means a query written in a different language wouldn't work very well. But we also recognize that a lot of researchers like asking questions in their own language, even if they like reading it in English. So we are planning to roll something like this out soon, which, as you can see, based on our transparency, translates the query and also uses different tools. So a mixture of not only the new vector search technology we have, but also the traditional keyword matching search technology of Scopus. And we're trying to combine those together to produce far high quality answers that are both more specific and also optimized for the type of search we have. And you asked me about the future, but without saying too much, you can imagine if we're entering a world where these tools get more intelligent and they can select the right kinds of services and tools in Scopus to solve a problem, then we can start answering a range of much more questions than Scopus AI can today. Maybe about people, maybe about journals, organizations, anything else you see here. And that's our goal, is to make these tools far more useful for more people, improve the quality of them, and start bringing in other elements of Scopus into things like Scopus AI. It's a very high level. I don't think, without giving away too much, that gives you an idea of the direction we're moving in. There are also other things we're told is we've made it easier to find new topics, but one of the big questions we keep getting asked is, well, that's great, but what I want to know is, where are the opportunities? So without saying too much, we want to also help with that area as well. I think that was the last question. Sorry, Kat.
There are still few questions in the Q&A, so
Okay.
but not
Sweet.
that many. I think we will be able to be on time and still answer those few that we have. Okay, there's more show up, so
Okay,
that's
great.
the magic of having the Q&A session. So let's start with the first one. How do you ensure that there are no hallucinations in the Scopus AI response?
So we have to caveat this. No generative AI tool in the world can guarantee no hallucinations. And we've never made the guarantee there are no hallucinations. It is not something anyone can make the claim. Hallucination is a risk, no matter what generative AI tool you use. That said, the approach we've taken using RAG, the retrieval augmented generation, where if you use a large language model by itself, risk hallucination can be quite high, especially as Kat mentioned, try and ask it for its sources, for example. And this speaks to the approach we've taken. The way we found to greatly reduce the risk of hallucination is by saying, ChatGPT, here's the content we think answers this question. Here's the question. Don't bring any of your own knowledge or information into this. Your only job is to look at this information, decide, do you think this directly relates to the query? And then when you make claim or assumptions, use this information and reference it where it happens. So what we found by doing this is we have massively reduced the risk of hallucination. And what we do internally is we run something, and you can look this up. There's a tool we call an open source tool called RefChecker. And what RefChecker does is is able to provide the question and the response and the source of material. And what we do is we periodically run these tests. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're trying to measure how well the responses generated are truly based on the content we've said to base them on. And we're constantly checking this using a variety of different tools. And if you would ask me for a number, and I would love to get a paper out on this quite soon, but we're pretty much, what we've seen surprised us. We have super high confidence in 90% of the responses we generate. We have high confidence in around about 9% on top of that. And we see right now only 1% of contraindications in the responses that we see so far. It's very low. Now, we're not saying that this eliminates hallucination. And there's also a question of, is our evaluation techniques correct for measuring hallucination? No one has a good answer for this right now, but we definitely want to be part of the pioneers of measuring that stuff correctly. But right now, based on what we've heard from the community, our evaluation internally, we feel that risk hallucination is quite low. But we do recommend, and we do say this, please check information carefully. And this is one of the reasons why we have the reference sources so prominent. So you can go in and click and check if the abstract makes sense to the reference. So then you can make an informed decision about whether you want to take this forward. As these tools also get better, the risk of hallucination will go down over time. But we think we've taken the absolute best steps we can right now to minimize it. And periodically, internally, we're also trying to measure it objectively. I hope that answers your question.
I believe so. If not, Jakub, please let us know somewhere in the chat or in the Q&A session. There's one question that I found is actually interesting. Is there any publication already describing Scopus AI? And I believe we are talking from the perspective of research. So is there any research article about Scopus AI?
Yeah, there is actually. I was just on a webinar with the American Librarian Association about this because there's actually some coming up that we're aware of, but one is just, mine has just been accepted for publication. It's in preprint right now. We can share that afterwards, Kat, but the Portuguese researchers have done an independent analysis of Scopus AI for their own research tasks. And if I can find the link, I'll bring it up.
That would be great.
It will be from the deck I did yesterday, so apologize as I look for it as I try to answer this question. But yeah, and their experiences, I think what they did was a fantastic, fair, and objective review of Scopus AI based on an earlier version of it. And what they found is it was a very useful research tool. They did say it wasn't a perfect research tool, that there were areas that we could improve. Some of the questions you raised here today, like, there's only 10 references, the limited time range, questions about risk of hallucination, but their overall experience was very positive. And I will try and pull up that paper before the end of this.
Okay, so there is few still questions, but I think we are also running out of time. So I'm proposing like this. You will look for the paper so we can still put the link into the chat. I will do the summary, and these 3 missing questions, I will pull them out and we will answer over the email to these 3 questions because there's really 3 left questions that we didn't manage to answer. So I promise that you will receive the answers to your questions over the email. And yes, and let me then switch to my screen for a while. This is going to be a very short summary because I see that we are running out of time and I don't want to, especially on Friday, make anyone stay longer. I can imagine that most of us are already thinking about the weekend and the free time. I hope that my screen is visible. I believe it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So now I will switch to Polish for a moment. Proszę Państwa, bardzo dziękujemy za udział i bardzo się cieszę, że wszyscy z Państwa mieli czas i do nas dołączyli. Nagranie będzie oczywiście udostępnione, tak jak wspomniałam, prześlemy mailowo, będzie też na kanale YouTube. Okres testowy kończy się nam 31 maja, dlatego uczulam Państwa, jeżeli mają Państwo zaplanowane jakieś wyszukania czy pracę naukową, którą chcą Państwo dokończyć, to koniecznie przed 31 maja, bo do tego momentu mogę zagwarantować, że ten dostęp będzie. Dostałam też sporo pytań już na poprzednim webinarze, co po okresie testowym. Więc po okresie testowym planujemy przedstawić ofertę na dodanie modułu Scopus AI do licencji krajowej Scopus. I po rozmowach z ICM, czyli naszym zarządzającą organizacją wirtualną Biblioteką Nauki, ICM przewiduje, że będzie to najwcześniej możliwe od początku 2025, o ile oczywiście ministerstwo zdecyduje się dofinansować ten moduł na podstawie wyników zarówno z okresu testowego, jak i również ankiet, które Państwo ode mnie otrzymają po tym webinarze, więc tutaj moja ogromna prośba, żeby Państwo w miarę możliwości wypełnili te ankiety, bo liczymy też na Państwa informację zwrotną od Państwa, jak Państwo widzą ten okres testowy, w jaki sposób się sprawdziło narzędzie, co faktycznie funkcjonowało. Ze względu na to, że mamy ten okres, kiedy nie będzie możliwości dostępu do Scopus AI na podstawie licencji krajowej i wiemy, że to będzie przynajmniej pół roku, mogę zaproponować Państwu licencję indywidualną dla instytucji w Polsce. I tu już wpisałam otwarcie, że taki koszt takiej licencji indywidualnej to jest między 812 a 1054 euro miesięcznie dla większości instytucji w Polsce, z wyjątkiem Uniwersytetu Jagiellońskiego, Warszawskiego oraz AGH. To są po prostu 3 większe uczelnie i ze względu na to mają one trochę zwiększone koszty. Jeżeli Państwo są taką licencją indywidualną dla instytucji zainteresowani, to proszę bardzo o kontakt bezpośrednio ze mną. W przypadku decyzji o licencji indywidualnej na drugie półrocze, dostęp w czerwcu dla tych instytucji będzie bezpłatny i to jest taka moja propozycja dla Państwa. No i tym sposobem już przechodząc dalej, oczywiście przypominam o wszelkiego rodzaju dostępnych od nas materiałach. Są dodatkowe materiały, mamy Scopus Support Center, tam też Państwo znajdą częściowo informacje na temat Scopus AI i na przykład wspomnianych Foundational Papers. Jest też informacja na temat innych baz, więc jeżeli jakby pojawiały się jakieś problemy z naszej strony, to zachęcam do sprawdzania właśnie w supporcie, czy nie ma informacji, jak ten problem można rozwiązać. Lista webinarów. Jak zawsze serdecznie Państwa zapraszam na nasze webinary. Już niewiele ich do końca czerwca pozostało, ale myślę, że warto dołączyć do moich kolegów i koleżanek, którzy też starają się Państwu pokazać, w jaki sposób nasze narzędzia Elsefieira mogą być wykorzystywane. I z mojej strony to tyle. Bardzo Państwu dziękuję za uwagę. Kontakt mailowy do mnie jest tutaj na dole w slajdzie. And Adrian, I would like to thank you also very much for joining us and explaining a lot about the Scopus AI solution. I believe that was really fruitful conversation and there was a lot of questions that we managed to answer. And I hope that based on this, the users and the participants of today's meeting, they will be able to continue their successful work with Scopus AI, which will be inspiring them to have great research articles.
I hope so as well. And thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak with all of you today. It was an absolute pleasure. Happy to
Great.
answer questions as well, which I'm sure will be collected and brought to me.
Yes, I will. I will do definitely. Okay, then thank you very much. And I wish you a happy, calm and happy weekend. That's what I would like to say. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.